So we're going to look at goal one, the new nation, and we're going to look at Presidents Washington, Adams, Jefferson, and Madison during this time period of 1789 to 1820. When the United States is first established, a lot of people feel that we are not going to remain a country. Matter of fact, most of Europe thinks that we're going to crash and crumble and they're going to be able to come back over here and recolonize. So because we think that, we're going to choose a very strong first president. And our first president is going to be George Washington. So George Washington, remember, he's the hero of the American Revolutionary War, and he gets unanimously voted into office. What that means is he gets everybody's vote for the presidency. So he's the first president of the United States. As the first president, he does not have a political party. Of course, North Carolina will tell you that he is a Federalist, but he leans towards the Federalist Party. But the Federalist Party is developed during his time in office. So John Adams will be his vice president, and John Adams doesn't really have much of a role as a vice president. The role isn't actually defined. And this is what you're going to see with the first president and the vice president, is that they don't really know what they're kind of supposed to do. So Washington and Adams try to figure out their role as the president and the vice president as they go along. When you look at what Washington does, we call him the precedent-setting president. So precedent, so he's going to set the standard of how to be the president of the United States. And when he sets the standard, he is going to serve 2 terms in office. So he could have actually served forever because Americans really did love the guy, but he serves 8 years. And this is probably one of his crowning achievements, is the fact that he sets a 2-term tradition. He actually understands that he needs to step down from power and let a smooth transition of power go for the next person. And that's one of his defining moments, is his ability as a leader to actually step down from leadership. The next thing the man is going to do is he will create a cabinet. And what the cabinet is a group of advisors to the President of the United States. He appoints his members to his cabinet. So Washington, who is a very smart man, he's an enlightened man. The issue is that Washington might know a lot about war, but he didn't know a whole lot about the economy. Or maybe he didn't know a whole lot about foreign affairs. So he will appoint secretaries in his cabinet who are experts on the matter. So he's going to have other people that will help him out. So Washington's example, his cabinet is his group of advisors, and his first cabinet is considered by most historians to be the best cabinet that we've ever had in the United States. The first Secretary of State is Thomas Jefferson, and basically what the Secretary of State does is they deal with foreign matters. So they deal with foreign affairs. Okay. The Secretary of Treasury is going to be Alexander Hamilton, and all the Treasury guy does is he deals with the money. Okay, and then Secretary of War is going to be Henry Knox, and of course he's going to deal with war, right? And then you've got the expanded role of the president in foreign affairs. So when Washington is the president, he has this cabinet, and Jefferson is supposed to help him out with foreign affairs. But Washington is also going to expand the role, the expectations of what it means to be the president of the United States domestically within the United States and foreign power-wise. He's going to become a legislative leader. That means he is going to actually propose bills to become laws. So remember, the legislative branch, law, they make the laws, and the president signs off on the laws, and as the executive, he's supposed to enforce the law, so he's the head of the police force, or the head executor, you know. But he actually proposes laws to be passed. During the first Congress, what Washington is actually going to do is he proposes and gets passed the Judiciary Act of 1789. So he signs into law the Judiciary Act of 1789. Judicial, it means your courts. So this is going to create and organize the federal court system, and a part of that federal court system would be the Supreme Court of the United States. So the Supreme Court is going to finally be created, and the president will appoint Supreme Court justices to the actual court. So they'll appoint them to the bench. This is one of the most important powers that a president has, for the simple fact that the people that are appointed as justices or chief justice of the Supreme Court, they have the position for life. Remember, they get to choose when they want to retire and step down from the bench, the Supreme Court. He is also going to establish this federal appeals court system with the Judiciary Act of 1789. So please know that this creates the federal court system, including the Supreme Court, and this is basically an appellate court system or an appeals court. He's also going to ratify the Bill of Rights, so he signs into law the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. This is going to protect and guarantee the rights of citizens. So during his time period, you have the Judiciary Act of 1789, you have the Bill of Rights, you have the creation of the cabinet. He is doing a whole lot in the first couple of years of his presidency. So he really is considered a person who really expands what we thought would be the role of the president. People didn't know what the role of the president was going to be. He has to define it. He's the first one. During his time in office, there is a huge financial debt that the U.S. had after the Revolutionary War. During the Revolutionary War, the United States had to borrow money from countries in order to fight Britain for our independence. Alexander Hamilton, as Secretary of Treasury, creates Alexander Hamilton's economic plan. It's possession because he created the plan. It's his plan. And so for the economic plan, what he wants to do is he wants the United States, the federal government, to assume all debts of the states. During the Revolutionary War, every single state had to fight for itself. They had to raise their own army. And so certain states had huge debts, like the North, where most of the Revolutionary War was fought. The southern states didn't have huge debts because it's only in the later years that the Revolutionary War was actually fought in the southern part of the United States, or the southern colonies. So when he wants to assume state debt, this is going to anger the southern states because they feel like they've paid off their debts, and they had. The northern states are a-okay with it because they hadn't paid off their debt. So he wants an assumption or assuming states' debts. The next thing he wants to do is he wants to create a national bank, or the first bank of the United States. Why does he want to do this? He wants to stabilize our currency. So during this time period, the United States is, we have like all these different currencies. Our country has inflation, deflation. It's crazy financially, and he wants to create a national bank to create a standardization. He also wants to impose high tariffs on foreign goods, and he wants to regulate the national currency. So when you look at Hamilton's economic plan, the easiest kind of way to remember it is, remember he has debt, and in order to have debt, you have to pay it off. And so he wants to pay it off, and how the government pays off all debt is they have taxes. Okay, so taxes would be like tariffs. And tariffs are taxes on imported goods. And then when you have money, because the government's collecting the money, you got to put money somewhere, and you go to the bank. So if you have debt, you're going to go ahead and bring in some money, figure out a way to raise money, and that would be through taxation for the government. So they'll place taxes, tariffs, and they place excise taxes, and excise taxes are taxes on specific items. And then he wants to go ahead and deposit the money in a bank. And all of this is actually going to help the United States stabilize our financial structure in the country. This is going to become a huge issue of conflict between Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton. And so this issue of conflict is between implied powers and explicit powers. What implied powers means is that if you can dream it, you can do it, right? This is very much an implied power, is very much a federalist belief system. Explicit power means it has to be in black and white. So if you imply something, it's like underneath, you know, you're reading something into it. Explicit, if it's not in black and white print, it's not allowed. So the creation of the bank, of the national bank, is what causes the two-party system to develop. So please understand, creation of the national bank equals two-party system. So when Thomas Jefferson says to Hamilton, you don't have the power to create the bank, because it doesn't say explicitly in the Constitution that the government has the power to create the bank. I mean, he was right in his way of interpreting it. When Hamilton responds, he says, he says the government has the power to regulate coinage. And so that means I have the power to create the bank. See, he's implying that he has the power to do it. This is that elasticity clause. That's the necessary and proper clause. That's what implied powers means. And this is very much a Hamilton belief. Now, Thomas Jefferson, if it's not written, it cannot be done. So he believes in explicit powers. During this time period, we get the two-party system created with the Democrats and the Federalists, and now Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton are going to argue some more because Hamilton's plan does get passed. Alexander Hamilton's economic plan is passed, and it's going to cause the Whiskey Rebellion to occur. So in 1791, these Pennsylvania farmers are upset. They're upset about that excise tax, and an excise tax is a tax on a specific item, and in this case, it was a tax on whiskey. So these farmers decide to go ahead and attack the tax collectors, and they cry out, "No taxation without representation." Hamilton goes to Washington and he says, this is the perfect example of what we need to do. We need to go ahead and decide right now that we will enforce the tax. And so Washington agrees, and he sends the militia, which is just a state guard, to stop the rebelling farmers. So Washington tells these whiskey rebellers, if you continue to rebel, please understand, I'm going to enforce the tax. You will pay the tax, and you are possibly going to die in the process, because not only am I going to send the militia, I will personally head the army to Pennsylvania and force you to pay the tax. Now, when you hear that the hero of the American Revolutionary War is about to put on his military uniform and come down to your place, you stop rebelling. So the farmers back down and the tax is collected. The most important part about the Whiskey Rebellion is it shows that federal law will be enforced and it will be followed. So you have representatives. We elect a representative government. So we elect our congresspersons. And these Pennsylvania farmers had elected these people, and they had approved Hamilton's economic plan. So that means that they have to pay the tax. Now, if they don't like those congresspersons that voted for the tax, well, in the next election year, they can vote them out, because that's your right as an American. So when we look at the financial debate, we've got to continue it here. Hamilton versus Jefferson. So Hamilton believes that the federal government has the power to create that bank because he uses the elastic clause, are the necessary and proper clause. Jefferson says there's no way that you have the actual power to create the bank because the Constitution does not say it explicitly. It does not say it in black and white ink. The federal government has the power to create the bank. So this debate over whether the government has the power or not is basically going to cause our two-party system to be created. So the debate over powers given to the president in the Constitution, the interpretation of it causes the two-party system to be created. You know, does the president have the power to actually create a bank? Does the United States government have the power to do this? And for Hamilton, he would say absolutely. For Jefferson, he says no way. So Hamilton is a federalist, and Jefferson's going to be a states' rights guy, and he's going to form the Democrat-Republican Party. So the tax collectors, see, this is the Whiskey Rebellion. And just understand that Washington puts it down, basically. So the British, they're still in occupation of our land here in the north and the west of the United States, and the British have been supporting the American Indians along the borders by giving them guns. So what we're going to do is John Jay is going to negotiate a treaty with Britain, and Britain is going to give up their forts in the Northwest Territory, which basically means the actual Great Lake area. And in exchange for that, the United States is supposed to pay all pre-war, pre-Revolutionary War debt. Americans hate Jay's Treaty because it makes us pay our pre-Revolutionary War debt. And Britain never leaves the Great Lakes forts, so it's kind of a